And now, marine weather around Alaska.
Marine forecast here for the central and south coast. We're looking at southeast winds 10 to 20 knots. For the north coast up there, east at 15 knots. Central northern interchannels, southeast at 10, and Clarence Strait, southeast winds 20 knots. And for the day on Tuesday, south winds 15 to 20 knots on the south coast, north coast, east-southeast 20. And Lynn Canal, Glacier Bay, Stevens Passage, southeast at 15, Clarence Strait, southeast at 20. Prince William Sound, light easterly breeze tomorrow at 10 knots. And east-southeast winds 15 knots, eastern North Gulf Coast. Here on the west side, all the way down across the Barren Islands, northeasterlies at 15. And for Cook Inlet, north to northeast winds 10 to 15 knots. For the day on Tuesday, Cook Inlet, northeast winds 10 to 20 knots. Northeast at 20 for Kamishak Bay, 15 knots for the Barren Islands. And for the North Gulf Coast, east to northeast winds 20 to as high as 25 knots, and northeast at 15 for Prince William Sound. Kodiak Island, variable winds 10 to 15 knots for Monday. Variable winds 10 to 15 knots here for the Alaska Peninsula, north at 10 for Bristol Bay. And moving on to Tuesday here, Alaska Peninsula really laid down. Variable winds at 10 knots with slight seas up 3 to 5 feet here on the Pacific side of the things. Northeast at 10 for Bristol Bay. Kodiak Island, northeasterlies 15 to 20 knots. And for the eastern Aleutians, variable winds 10 to 15 knots. Same thing for Adak and Atka. Western Aleutians, west to northwest winds 15 to 20 knots. And for the day on Tuesday, western Aleutians, north to northwest winds at 15 to 20 knots. West at 15 to 20 for the central Aleutians, and west-northwest 15 knots for the Fox Islands. Southwest coast, northeast winds 10 to 15 knots. And for the St. Lawrence Island area, northeast winds there at 15 knots with 15-knot winds for Norton Sound as well. Northeast at 20 there for the St. Matthew Island area. And for the Pribilofs, variable winds at 10 knots. Light variable winds continue here, so light wind couple of days coming up there for the Pribilof Islands, north of 15, not too much stronger there for St. Matthew Island. Southwest coast, light northeast winds at 10 knots, northeast at 15, Norton Sound, St. Lawrence Island. Up to the north, Chukchi Sea, north to northeast winds 5 to 15 knots. Brisk wind advisories for the western Arctic coast, east-northeast 25 to 30 knots there, but much lighter on the central and east side. Looking at winds at 15 knots for those locations. And then even lighter winds in store for the central and eastern Arctic coast at about 10 knots there from the northeast to west. Brisk wind advisories will continue for the western Arctic coast for easterlies at 25 to 30 knots, and the Chukchi Sea, east to northeast winds at 10 to 20 knots.